The new Gate started as a revolutionary VR MMORPG, granting players unprecedented freedom in their adventures. However, it abruptly turned into a deadly battle, trapping players in the game with no means of logging out. Those who perished in the game faced the same fate in reality. On an open field, a group of skeletons engages players in combat. As the skeleton soldiers claim the lives of several players, a girl finds herself on the brink of defeat until a mysterious man gallantly comes to her rescue. Despite her curiosity about his identity, he remains focused on dispatching the skeletons. He's a determined player, relentlessly fighting in the hope of ending the game's deadly grip. Some time ago, he left behind his comrades to pursue this mission, promising to return. However, he found himself embroiled in a fierce battle against a formidable boss. Despite its massive size, the boss strikes swiftly, forcing the player to dodge with precision. Though he attempts to deal a fatal blow, the boss evades, sustaining only minor damage. Refusing to succumb to desperation, the player regains his composure. He observes the boss's HP regenerating and wounds healing, prompting him to take decisive action. With resolve, he charges towards the boss, determined to disrupt its regeneration. He attempts another lethal strike at the boss, but the boss manages to block it, staggering from the force. Seizing the opportunity, he delivers a devastating blow. Although hopeful for victory, the boss begins to heal once more. Determined to end the battle decisively, he prepares for a final, monumental attack. Empowering his sword, he charges at the boss, leaping into the air and delivering a crushing blow that reduces the boss to dust. With the boss defeated, the game system acknowledges his triumph and grants him new titles. It announces the possibility for players to log out now that the dungeon is cleared. Feeling accomplished, he checks if other players are logging out globally. However, he discovers that he is the sole remaining player on the online scroll. Shin, realizing he cannot log out, witnesses a massive gate opening behind him, suggesting he has completed the game. As he is absorbed into the game, he awakens in a remarkably lifelike grassy plain. Puzzled by the realism, he questions if he's truly in the game world, considering the limitations of VR technology. Upon examining his increased stats, he realizes something extraordinary has occurred. He deduces that his inability to log out is a result of defeating the final boss, indicating that he has completed the game. Despite this, he finds that the logout button is missing from the game screen. Attempting to check the online scroll for other players, he discovers that he's not connected to the game network. Perplexed by his ability to move without network connection, he realizes that the game world has become his new reality, causing him a moment of panic. However, he quickly resolves to maintain composure, understanding that panicking won't assist him. Utilizing an item that guides him back to his home base, he follows its lead. En route, he notices new structures along the roadside, prompting him to question when they were erected. Upon reaching his base, he witnesses a group of bandits coercing an elf girl to reveal her master's location. When she refuses, they forcibly drag her away from the base. As the elf girl crosses a barrier, triggering a colossal guard monster, the bandits flee while the creature menaces the girl. Reacting swiftly, Shin intervenes to confront the monster, realizing that he can adjust the potency of his magical ability, though physical exertion taxes him. Shin is astounded by the immersive realism of the game's world as they re-enter the base. The elf introduces herself as Tiara and inquires if Shin is acquainted with her master, Shni. Confused, Shin racks his memory for any recollection of the name. Suddenly, a memory surfaces. Shni was the name of an elf support character from the game, and Shin describes her appearance to Tiara. Seeking Shni's whereabouts, Shin presses Tiara for information, but she hesitates due to suspicion. Instead, she offers to convey a message to her master for a fee of 1,000 jewels. Having only jails in his possession, Shin retrieves them from his item box, surprising Tiara, who notes that only esteemed individuals possess such boxes. She further reveals that jails hold significant value, contrary to Shin's memory of them being lesser currency in the game. Puzzled by Shin's identity, Tiara learns he's merely an adventurer who chose the high human species at the game's start. To Shin's shock, Tiara informs him that high humans vanished 500 years ago during a period known as the Dusk of Prosperity, an event unfamiliar to Shin. Tiara explains it was a time marked by widespread disappearance, leaving Shin intrigued by this revelation. Shin connects the dots, realizing that the mass disappearance might coincide with the time when players trapped in the game vanish. It dawns on him that the world he's in now exists 500 years post-game events. Tiara brings Shin back to the present moment, and he expresses gratitude by offering her the 1 jail as a token of appreciation for her insights. Tiara declines the gift, deeming it imprudent to accept something of such value from a recent acquaintance. Shin assures her she need not return it, and Tiara, touched, reluctantly accepts it, relishing the opportunity to hold such a precious coin. Shin explains the utility of the jail coin for an elf like her, but Tiara is astonished that Shin can discern her elven heritage. She confides that she wears an illusion spell cast by her master to conceal her identity, as black-haired elves are considered omens of misfortune, leading to her expulsion from her village. However, her master intervened, rescuing her and providing sanctuary for over a century. Shin wonders if the curse can be lifted, prompting Tiara to reveal that her master is currently seeking a solution. Tara confides in Shin that she's resigned to living in secrecy, but Shin ponders whether her hair has always been black. She reveals that her hair used to be silver until she was cursed, which caused it to turn black. Determined to help, Shin brainstorms potential solutions and realizes Tara can be cured. He accesses his skill menu, prompting Tara's curiosity about his actions. Using his Analyze skill, Shin discovers that Tara possesses the cursed gift, the source of her perpetual monster attacks. Although Tara believes mere identification won't cure the curse, Shin employs his Purify skill to heal her. As the skill concludes, Tara questions whether it failed. Shin reassures her that the skill was successful, although only part of her hair reverted to silver. Surprised, Tara rushes to inspect herself in the mirror. Despite the partial transformation, she sincerely thanks Shin for alleviating part of the curse, expressing gratitude for glimpsing her silver hair after a century of waiting. Moved by her gratitude, Shin suggests Tara attempt to leave the barrier, assuring her of his protection against any monster threats. Though initially hesitant, Tara decides to trust Shin's words and steps beyond the barrier, taking a leap of faith into the unknown. They traverse through a nearby forest until they reach a grassy plateau, where Shin informs Tiara that her curse has been lifted, evident from the absence of monster attacks during their journey. Overwhelmed with joy, Tiara sheds tears at the sight of the beautiful sky once more. Returning to the base, she expresses heartfelt gratitude to Shin for his assistance. As they await Tiara's master's arrival, she wonders about Shin's plans. He decides to explore a nearby town in search of his other support character and to familiarize himself with the new game world. Tiara provides him with a letter of instruction to present to the kingdom he spotted on his way to the base. Explaining that the letter will allow him to bypass the inspection line, Tiara jests about entrusting valuables to a stranger, but Shin accepts it graciously as a token of gratitude for helping her lift the curse. Promising to notify him upon her master's return, Tiara bids him farewell as he departs for the kingdom. Upon reaching the kingdom, Shin is surprised to find that the letter of introduction grants him the privilege of skipping the inspection line. He marvels at its significance, with the guard escorting him, emphasizing its potential to secure an audience with the king. Guided to the Adventurers Guild, Shin plans to gather information and registers as an adventurer. To his surprise, he encounters the same person he met at the front door, realizing that she is the twin sister of the guild worker named Celica. Celica introduces herself and instructs Shin to pay an application fee and fill out a form. After a considerable wait, Shin finds himself sitting in the guild, surprised by the lengthy process of obtaining a guild card, which takes almost a day. Observing the other adventurers, he notices their modest weapons and armor, realizing they are of lower quality compared to those in the game. Unexpectedly, Celica approaches Shin, expressing gratitude for his patience. She offers him a snack and joins him, encouraging him to taste it. However, Shin becomes uneasy when he notices Celica's gaze fixed on him. She explains that she wants to confirm something, prompting Shin's curiosity. Celica inquires if Shin possesses a letter of introduction from his base, expressing the need to verify its authenticity in another room. Agreeing to the request after finishing his snack, Shin expresses reluctance to meet the guild master so soon. Nonetheless, Celica reveals that the peculiar man from reception is, in fact, the guild master. Identifying himself as Barlux, the guild master leads Shin to a private room. Requesting to see Shin's identification letter from the Moon Sanctum, Barlux places it alongside another letter on the table, causing Shin's letter to emit a faint glow. Barlux confirms the authenticity of Shin's letter, surprising Shin with the thorough verification process. Curious, Barlux inquires about the source of the verification letter, and Shin mentions Tiara as the provider. Barlux realizes there might have been a lapse in Tiara's explanation regarding the verification process, leading to Shin's surprise. Explaining the significance of the identification letter, Barlux emphasizes its vulnerability to theft due to its crucial role. He advises Shin to dispose of the letter if he cannot ensure its safety. However, Shin assures Barlux of his capability to protect it, earning Barlux's approval. Deciding to test Shin's skills, Barlux leaves him exhausted by the end of the day, as he reflects on his plans to raise his rank and awaits Shin's return to the base. Disappointed upon waking up the next day, Shin heads to the guild where Celica greets him. Noticing his changed attire, Celica hands him his guild card and explains the 9 ranks, ranging from SS to S through to G. She explains to him that he can increase his rank by completing tasks and earning points, adding that he's eligible to undertake tasks 2 ranks higher than his current one. When Shin presents a job involving harvesting hillgrass, she approves it as a suitable task for him. Leaving the guild, Shin embarks on a search for hillgrass but struggles to find any despite hours of effort. Nevertheless, he finds solace in knowing that low-rank equipment is effective against monsters, allowing him to continue his search at a leisurely pace. Suddenly, his sensor detects a nearby monster, prompting him to investigate. Upon encountering the monster, Shin realizes it's of a high level and possesses formidable strength. Despite this, he decides to confront it, only to find his attacks ineffective against it. Surprised by the undead monster wielding a light weapon, Shin removes his limit and delivers a powerful blow that destroys the monster's core in a single hit, causing it to collapse. However, Shin is disappointed as the light sword, which he desired to replace his broken one, disappears into oblivion. Nevertheless, he retrieves a gemstone dropped by the defeated monster, gaining a better understanding of how things operate in the game world and anticipating the fun ahead. Meanwhile, the light sword mysteriously lands in the king's castle, leaving the king's guards bewildered about its origins. This brings an end to our episode. If you enjoyed it, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe our channel for more anime recaps. The knights contemplate what to do with the sword, and Lady Ryan proposes getting an appraiser to examine its composition. She also suggests investigating who launched the sword into the castle, realizing the launcher must possess significant power. Meanwhile, villagers watch with surprise as wounded soldiers return from their expedition. Shin is curious about what happened to them, and a knight informs him they were attacked in the northern woods by Skullface. Shockingly, only 4 out of the 12 soldiers survived. Shin connects the dots, realizing the soldiers were victims of the wreckage he witnessed in the forest. Additionally, the knight mentions that witnesses saw a sword fly out of the forest and crash into the castle, fortunately without causing any harm. Suspecting Shin might know something, the knight questions him. Shin insists he was merely harvesting hiltgrass and pledges to relay any pertinent information he comes across, as he's the one investigating the case. Shin silently feels sorry for burdening the knight with extra work but is relieved that no one was harmed by the sword. Returning to the Adventurers Guild, he's warmly greeted by Celica. Shin explains that he's there to make a report and wonders if the town's disturbance was linked to Skullface. Celica reveals that an urgent request for extermination was issued due to the incident's proximity to the castle. Curious about Shin's report, she listens as he tells her he defeated Skullface Jack and presents the gem the creature dropped, surprising Celica. Shin describes Skullface's peculiarity, mentioning its ability to shatter his sword. Celica interjects, cautioning Shin that such monsters are formidable foes. Shin, feeling crowded, asks her to respect his personal space, puzzled by her astonishment. Just then, Els enters, advising Shin not to tease her partner. She's been informed about him by Celica, who now shares the news of Shin's victory over Skullface Jack. Although surprised, Els hears Shin explain that he lacks proof, as he didn't bring the creature's armor due to its unimpressive nature. Els explains that Shin can't access the gear without the proper rank, expressing surprise that Shin, who claims to be an adventurer, isn't aware of this. She expresses interest in examining the gem to check for traces of the Skullface's mana. Celica tells Shin they'll be borrowing the gem for this purpose. Shin questions if Skullfaces are common in the forest, to which Els explains that undead are created when mana merges with the grudges of the fallen. She mentions the high death toll in the forest due to monsters, creating ideal conditions for undead. Els clarifies that the mana level of the area shouldn't be sufficient to spawn a Skullface, leading Shin to realize the rarity of the occurrence, especially given that the Skullface was level 359. Surprised by this, Celica decides to hasten the gem's appraisal and asks Els to cover for her at the desk. Shin is impressed that they can determine the monster's strength through appraisal. Els reassures him that he's as strong as a rank party, given his ability to defeat the monster solo. Shin pleads with Els to keep the information about his strength a secret to avoid drawing unwanted attention to himself, and Els assures him she'll maintain his confidentiality. Shin heads to a restaurant and is surprised to see Celica working there, as he didn't anticipate her employment at the establishment. Celica guides him to a table, where he sits, albeit feeling somewhat awkward dining alone. Suddenly, Avis enters the restaurant, capturing everyone's attention as he approaches Shin's table. Shin notices he's carrying the legendary magic spear named Venom, known for its formidable abilities. Avis joins Shin at the table, and Shin introduces himself. Avis inquires if Shin is a new adventurer, to which Shin reveals it's only his 3rd day in the profession. Observing Shin's equipment, Avis remarks it suggests more experience than a newcomer. Shin explains he's not familiar with the usual standards around the castle area, as he's from elsewhere. Understanding Shin's perspective, Avis realizes why Shin didn't react fearfully to his reputation. Shin wonders why people are intimidated by him, prompting Avis to explain he's known as Avis the Vampire for his expertise in hunting undead creatures. Shin initially thought the nickname referred to Avis's complexion, but Avis clarifies it's because Venom possesses the Drain ability, which absorbs its victim's life force and transfers it to the wielder. Avis harbored concerns that Venom might drain his life force unexpectedly. Silica returns with their meals, and they eagerly begin eating. The following day, Shin visits the library, feeling a sense of nostalgia as it's been a while since he last visited one. Hoping to discover something new, he picks up a history book about the kingdom from the shelf. Upon reading, he learns that the kingdom was established approximately 511 years ago, coinciding with the time of the mysterious disappearances. Intrigued, Shin decides to delve deeper into research and discovers that the people in the world he now inhabits are the same as the characters in the game. With his curiosity satisfied, Shin leaves the library, having absorbed all the knowledge he could from the books. Barlux convenes a guild council meeting, announcing the defeat of the Skull Face by the hero adventurer and the examination of the returned gem. The knights express surprise that the Slayer didn't take the Skull Face's armor, deeming it unimpressive. Upon learning that the Skull Face was confirmed to be level 359, Barlux expresses relief at having this information clarified. However, he ponders whether similar monsters are present in the area. A knight reports that soldiers have already been dispatched to investigate, and they anticipate receiving further details the following day. Barlux is aware that Skull Faces are typically active during the night, so he instructs the knights to remain vigilant after dark. One knight expresses curiosity about the unusual weapon wielded by the Skull Face, and who defeated it. Barlux allows discussion about the weapon but respects the Slayer's wish for anonymity. The knight seeks clarification on whether the appearance of the strange sword in the castle is linked to the defeat of the Skull Face. Barlux wonders about the nature of the sword, and the knight reveals it to be a blend of magic steel and mithril, enchanted with light elements. Realizing its potential, they speculate that the sword may rival their nation's royal sword in power. Recognizing the sword's legendary status, Barlux understands the knight's curiosity about the Skullface Slayer. The knight then reveals there's some trouble brewing, prompting concern. Meanwhile, Shin sits by a fountain feeling disheartened by his difficulty in gathering information. As he eats steak, he notices a beast girl watching him and offers her some food. Observing her tiger-like appearance, Shin wonders if she's lost. However, she surprises him by expressing gratitude for the food. Introducing herself as Millie, she appreciates Shin's kindness. Shin introduces himself to Millie and mentions that he's heading home due to the late hour. Curious if Millie is also heading home, she informs him that Avis is coming to pick her up. Shin is surprised to encounter Avis again and wonders if Millie is his child. Avis clarifies that Millie is an orphan from the church but has a knack for sneaking out, and he's responsible for bringing her back. Avis is amazed that Millie has taken a liking to Shin, as she's typically shy. Though Avis intends to take Millie home, she pleads with Shin to help save some foxes in the northern woods. Eventually, Avis escorts Millie home while Shin ponders over Millie's request. He questions why she sought his help but decides to assist since he has no other plans until Shni returns. Recalling a means to contact Shni, Shin resolves to give it a try. The following day, he visits the Moon Sanctum and apologizes to Tiara for forgetting to leave a message earlier. He hands her a sword, instructing Tiara to notify Shni to find him if she recognizes the weapon. Tiara recognizes the sword as an ancient weapon, and Shin identifies it as the Blue Moon, belonging to Shni's world. He explains that only he, Shni, or those they authorize can wield it. Recognizing its immense power, Tiara expresses reluctance, fearing it could overwhelm her. As Shin delves into the sword's composition, he notices Tiara struggling to comprehend and apologizes for overwhelming her. Concerned about Shni's memory of him, Shin entrusts Tiara with the sword and letters to reach him upon Shni's return. He explains the mail system to her, but she questions why he can't directly contact Shni. Shin recounts his failed attempt the previous night, prompting Tiara to question the effectiveness of the items. To test it, Shin steps outside, and a mail promptly appears in front of Tiara, confirming its functionality. Shin deduces that the mail's delivery depends on whether he's met the recipient in the new world or not. Tiara requests a few letters from him, and Shin agrees, as he has some to spare. She explains her aspiration to become a mage and study magic items. In return for delivering his message to Shni, Shin decides to give her some letters. Leaving the Moon Sanctum base, Shin ponders whether Tiara should send one of the letters to her master. Heading to the northern woods, Shin finds himself uncertain about how to save the foxes upon arrival. Despite attempting to venture deeper into the forest, he encounters an impenetrable barrier and hears a voice urging him to leave. Surprised by the mental interference despite his enhanced resistance, Shin interprets it as a warning of formidable opposition ahead, prompting him to press on. Arriving at a shrine, the mental interference dissipates, leading Shin to believe the shrine is the barrier's focal point. Upon entering the shrine, he discovers a wounded fox lying within a magic circle. Finding no traps, Shin rushes to aid the fox, realizing its dire condition. Upon healing it, another barrier breaks nearby, revealing undead soldiers. Determined to prevent further casualties, Shin engages the undead soldiers with his magic sword. However, he is confronted by two new adversaries as fox statues atop pedestals suddenly transform into towering golem foxes. Shocked by their appearance and their formidable level of 674, Shin faces their magical attacks, noting the erratic behavior caused by their aura. Shin resolves to contain the foxes to prevent them from causing further harm. Employing shadows, he immobilizes them, but they retaliate by creating a smokescreen that inadvertently harms the injured fox he is trying to rescue. Faced with the fox's aggression, Shin hastens to end the battle, only to realize his shadow manipulation has waned. Preparing to unleash his full power, Shin is redirected by the injured fox towards the magic circle it occupied. Relieved that the smokescreen did not affect the magic circles, Shin capitalizes on this, prompting the foxes to notice as well. Despite their charge, he ensnares them with magic chains and delivers a decisive blow with his magic spear. With the miasma dispersed, Shin examines the features of the small fox, identifying it as an elemental tail. Surprised by its diminutive size compared to others of its kind, Shin decides to make it his companion. Meanwhile, Shni receives a magical letter from Tiara, prompting her curiosity about how Tiara obtained such an item. Upon opening the letter, Shni is taken aback by its contents. Shin heads back to the guild to report the unexpected appearance of numerous skull faces. Concerned about the guild learning of the fox, he decides to form a partnership with it to conceal its identity and level, ensuring they can remain together. The fox agrees, and they initiate the partnership with a contract. Shin chooses the name Yusuha for the fox, which pleases it. While contemplating the fox's name, Shin receives a notification from Tiara, informing him of her success in communicating with her master, Shni. Surprised by this development, Shin replies, asking Tiara to convey his greetings to Shni. Accompanied by Yusuha, Shin arrives at the guild and encounters the twin sisters at the reception desk. They encourage him to report his findings, with Celica insisting she should handle it. Celica is puzzled by Celica's behavior, noticing her unusual demeanor. Celica insists that she shouldn't handle Shin's report, and Celica agrees, allowing Celica to take charge of it. Shin shares his report with Celica, feeling relieved to have expressed himself. Afterwards, he heads to the request board to explore other job opportunities. While browsing the requests, Yusuha draws his attention to a unique one seeking a skill successor. Shin ponders the meaning behind this request, noting its unranked status and origin from the church orphanage. Intrigued, he decides to accept the request, coinciding with his plan to visit Millie at the orphanage. Upon arriving at the church orphanage, Shin admires its architectural beauty and encounters a nun, who questions his presence. Apologizing for his distraction, Shin explains his purpose and expresses interest in Millie's whereabouts. The nun confirms Millie's presence and leads Shin to her room. Millie warmly welcomes Shin, while the nun observes Shin's genuine demeanor, contrasting with her previous impression. Surprised by Millie's fondness for Shin, the nun apologizes for misjudging him. Shin introduces himself as an adventurer, and the nun, named Traya, reciprocates with her own introduction. With Traya's permission, Shin seeks clarification from Millie about their earlier conversation regarding the fox. Millie confirms that Yusuha was indeed the fox she wanted him to save and expresses gratitude for his help. However, Shin credits Millie for providing the crucial information that led to Yusuha's rescue. Curious about Traya's request, Shin begins to inquire. Recognizing his interest, Traya acknowledges that Shin likely possesses a skill, given his curiosity. Shin admits to having a skill, explaining that while common in the game, skill holders are now rare. Traya explains that she seeks to learn a specific skill, and needs someone with the inherited ability to teach her. Shin assumes she needs a healing skill, given her role in the church, but Traya clarifies that she desires the purifying skill for reasons beyond her profession. Shin is surprised by this revelation, and Traya acknowledges that her request is demanding. She asks if he would be willing to teach her the skill, to which Shin responds that it depends on various factors. Traya interprets his response as referring to the reward for the request, but Shin clarifies that he seeks information about Millie's abilities in exchange for his services. Additionally, he requests any relevant information the church may have. Aware that Traya may not readily share such information, Shin anticipates negotiation. Shin decided to approach Traya to utilize the church as a source of information, recognizing his lack of knowledge about the new world. Millie speaks highly of Shin's character to Traya, leading her to accept his terms. However, she informs Shin that their ability to gather information is limited because they lack expertise. Shin reassures Traya that he simply wants to be notified if anyone shares anything noteworthy at the church. He expresses a greater interest in learning about Millie's abilities. Traya reveals that Millie holds the title of Star Composer, granting her accurate visions of the future. Shin realizes that Millie possesses precognitive abilities. Concerned for Millie's safety if her powers were discovered, Shin learns that precautions have been taken to keep her abilities hidden. Traya mentions an adventurer named Avis who assists in safeguarding Millie. Shin accepts the request but wonders if Traya herself will be learning the skill. Traya explains that she intends for one of her sisters to learn the skill, as their former priest has a granddaughter who would inherit the church smoothly if she acquired it. While the children show affection to Yuzua, Shin feels disappointed that none of them show similar interest in him. He notices Millie's absence from the group and learns that she refrains from interacting with Yuzua due to the fox's larger size. Yuzua suddenly rushes toward Shin, prompting Millie to call her over to keep the fox company. Shin realizes that Millie likely used her powers to attract Yuzua to her. However, when he tries to greet the children, they disappear quickly. A child approaches Shin, expressing hope that he might be the one to save them from the authorities' plan to shut down the orphanage. Shin asks for more information, and the child explains that the church needs a new priest, and Traya cannot take over because the successor must possess a special skill. Shin understands that this is why Traya wants to learn the Purify skill. The child adds that the former priest's granddaughter could claim ownership of the church if she learns the skill. Now comprehending Traya's motives, Shin wonders why the church's priest would want to close the orphanage. The child reveals that the priest is disliked because of his focus on money, providing Shin with insight into the priest's character. Millie assures the children that Shin will be their savior, which comforts the child. Shin asks the child if Millie is always accurate in her predictions. The child shares that Millie's predictions have been reliable in finding good deals and hidden treats, although that wasn't Shin's inquiry. Shin concludes that Millie should be cautious about what she reveals to others. Millie questions if she's using her powers strangely, but Shin reassures her that she's using them for positive purposes. Shin affectionately pats Millie on the head, prompting all the children to seek head pats from him. Traya emerges from the church, expressing gratitude to Shin for waiting, but she finds him surrounded by children using him as their pillow. Traya instructs Lasha to introduce herself to Shin, but Lasha stumbles over her words, leading Shin to inquire if she's alright. Traya explains that Lasha is a bit clumsy despite her diligence. Shin informs Traya that he'll be teaching Lasha the Purify skill, and emphasizes that her success in learning depends on her efforts. However, Shin decides to inquire if Lasha knows where large numbers of high-level undead creatures tend to appear. Traya mentions that the Ghost Plains is renowned for its abundance of high-level undead. Just then, Avis bursts into the room to discover that Shin has taken on the task. Avis expresses curiosity about Shin's intentions. Shin admits that he seeks information about Millie's power, and the adventurer who helps conceal it. Avis realizes Traya has divulged a lot and advises her to be cautious, but she trusts Shin based on Millie's confirmation. Avis questions if Millie had a vision, and Traya confirms it. Reluctantly, Avis agrees to trust Shin because of Millie's trust in him, and Shin assures him of their secrecy. Avis warns Shin that he'll take action if any secrets are revealed, but Millie chides him for being overly cautious. Traya apologizes for Avis's brusqueness, and he asks Shin to explain the Purify skill. Shin describes the process, explaining that defeating 200 undead creatures above level 150 with a Holy Prayer Orb item is necessary for purification. Shin plans to weaken the monsters while Lasha deals the finishing blows. He mentions already possessing a Holy Prayer Orb, a rare item. Avis decides to accompany them to ensure Lasha's safety, and Traya encourages Lasha's efforts. Although Avis is unfamiliar with Shin, he trusts Millie's judgment, though he harbors doubts about Shin's ability to handle the task. Shin leaves the church, intending to rest early for their journey the next day. However, Avis interrupts him, asking him to join him to confirm if Shin is a chosen one. Shin is perplexed and Avis explains that chosen ones possess skills, titles, and knowledge beyond normal acquisition. Shin ponders if they also have memories of past lives, but Avis clarifies that they have information about items and monsters. Shin contemplates the concept of reincarnation in the game, recalling his previous experiences but noting that he didn't start anew as a baby in this world. Avis observes Shin's pensive demeanor and decides to cease his inquiries, cautioning him to maintain secrecy regarding chosen ones. Shin admires Avis's caring nature and protective stance towards the orphanage, finding it ironic that people dislike him. Avis explains his efforts to oppose the new priest due to the children's distress, which causes him discomfort. Despite this, Shin recognizes Avis's kindness and stifles a laugh. However, Avis notices Shin's amusement and prepares to confront him before Shin receives an urgent message from Tiara. Tiara informs Shin of Nai's imminent return and expresses anxiety over her master's inquiries about him. Shin receives another significant message and retrieves his introduction letter from the Moon Sanctum. Avis recognizes the seal and verifies the authenticity of Shin's letter, both surprised to possess letters from the Moon Sanctum. The following day, they reach the plains, and Shin passes the holy prayer orb to Lasha since she must hold it. Venturing deep into the plains, they encounter a sudden onslaught of undead. Shin encourages Lasha to give her best effort. As the undead close in, Shin takes them down to allow Lasha to heal, relieved to find that his skills function similarly to those in the game. Subsequent waves of undead attack, targeting their limbs for Lasha to eliminate. Continuing their journey, they encounter a barrier erected by the guild to shield against high-level undead. Avis explains the purpose of the barrier. Upon passing through, Shin notices enemies surrounding them. He assigns Avis to deal with those ahead while he handles those to their left, leaving Yuzua under Lasha's protection. They defeat the monsters to allow Lasha to heal them. Meanwhile, Ryan battles high-level undead in the plains, reflecting on the aid she received from a mysterious sword. She witnesses Shni rescuing a struggling soldier party from a massive undead threat effortlessly. Shani arrives just in time and swiftly defeats the monster within seconds. Afterward, she uses her healing abilities to tend to the injured soldiers, who express their gratitude for her timely intervention. Shani humbly attributes her success to the soldiers' efforts in wearing down the monster over time. One of the soldiers reflects on the recent surge of undead creatures appearing outside the Ghost Plains over the past month, despite efforts by elite units to contain them. He is astonished that Shani managed to defeat one of these monsters single-handedly. Recognizing her past connection to a high-ranking human, he acknowledges that such feats are expected of someone with her background. Shani inquires if they have encountered any more irregular monster, to which the soldier confirms that this was the last one. Despite this, Shani decides to continue scouring the area as a precaution and advises the soldiers to use the magic she provided if they encounter any further threats. She ventures into the forest, feeling content that her master has returned. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Wilhelm engaging in combat with a skull face, which he dispatches with ease. Lisha delivers the final blow, triggering a radiant glow around her. Shin explains that this glow signifies the fulfillment of conditions to learn a new skill. Once the glow fades, Wilhelm checks on Lisha's well-being, and she assures him that she's fine. She shares her experience of being flooded with images on how to use her newly acquired skill, identified as Purify by Shin. Lisha expresses her happiness, knowing that she can now use this skill to protect the orphanage. Shin suggests taking a brief break before returning to Beorling, but his attention is drawn to a dark mass of magical energy hovering in the air. Wilhelm identifies it as the source animating the undead, explaining that it absorbs the energy of weaker undead until they dissipate, eventually spawning a powerful skull-faced lord. This new foe boasts an impressive level of 804, much to the surprise of Wilhelm and Lisha, who realize its destructive potential. Lisha reassures herself that they should be protected by the barrier surrounding the area, but Shin expresses doubts. The skull-faced lord tests the barrier by striking it, causing it to crack, shattering Lisha's sense of security. As they attempt to flee, they find themselves surrounded by undead minions, leaving Lisha panicked about their next move. Wilhelm proposes breaking through the undead ranks to escape, but Shin decides to stay behind. He removes his limiter, determined to prevent further chaos now that the barrier has failed. Shin urges Wilhelm and Lisha to return to the kingdom while he confronts the monsters alone. Wilhelm is taken aback by Shin's resolve and newfound power, prompting him to inquire about Shin's true identity. Shin assures Wilhelm that he will explain everything later, instructing him to take care of Yuzua and Lisha. He casts a physical buff on Wilhelm to enhance his speed, intending to help him escape faster. Although Wilhelm attempts to take Yuzua with him, she refuses to let go of Shin, prompting Wilhelm to leave her in Shin's care. Shin then clears a path for Wilhelm to escape before turning his attention to the undead. In the midst of the battle, Yuzua assists Shin by utilizing Fox Fire. However, the skull-faced lord emits another deafening roar, causing the undead Shin previously defeated to be replaced by new ones. Recognizing the challenge ahead, Shin employs a skill called Thunderstrike to eliminate some of the undead. Shni notices the glow from this skill and heads towards its location. Afterward, Shin consults his map, noticing it teeming with monsters. He acknowledges that having Shni by his side would provide more strategic options for attack. He spots a blue marker approaching him on the map, indicating an ally. Realizing who it is, Shin moves towards the marker and reunites with Shni amidst a picturesque field of flowers. Despite his attempts to speak, they are soon surrounded by undead. Yuzua shields them using her barrier. Shni embraces Shin before he can articulate his thoughts, inquiring if he has something to say. Shin apologizes for leaving her and expresses gratitude for her care of the shop, but he senses this is not what she wants to hear. Instead, he reassures her that he is home, to which she warmly welcomes him back. Shni confesses she had doubted Shin's return, prompting him to reflect on the fact that he expected the game's end to erase his saved data, including the Moon Sanctum, Shni, and his other companions. Yuzua's power runs out, prompting Shin to suggest dealing with the monsters before continuing their conversation. Proposing a combination attack, they execute a spell called Sanctuary. While this heals Yuzua and eliminates the weaker undead, the Skull-Face Lord remains unscathed. Shin then swiftly cuts the Skull-Face Lord in half with a single sword strike. Before perishing, the Skull-Face Lord unexpectedly speaks, asking Shin to bestow upon him his power. Surprised by the monster's speech, Shin assures Shiny that he is fine, although he admits to not learning anything about the monster in the inn. Deciding to chat for a while, Shin and Shiny move to another location. Shin recalls how Shiny had sent him off to defeat Origin, and confirms that he did so. However, despite defeating Origin, huge doors appeared in the dungeon boss room, causing him to lose consciousness when they opened. When he woke up, he found himself in a field, realizing that he had traveled 500 years into the future. SHNI expresses surprise upon hearing this, and informs Shin that the dungeons have completely vanished. When other players' support characters began reporting that their masters had disappeared, she deduced that Shin had cleared the dungeon. However, it puzzled them that they remained in the world when they should have vanished along with the players. Thus, they decided to search for their master. The seismic shift caused chaos on the continent, leading them to split up to work separately. SHNI returned to the Moon Sanctum, aligning with Shin's research findings. Shin then requests Shni to refrain from addressing him as her master, fearing it might attract attention if someone overhears a legend like her addressing him in that manner. Shni, uncertain how to address him now, is asked by Shin to simply call him by his name. Though embarrassed, SHNI complies, and Shin appreciates the change. SHNI then inquires about Shin's plans. He mentions his intention to visit the sacred site he read about in his research at the kingdom's library. When he asks if she has been there, SHNI confirms she has, but only for a cursory investigation, unaware of its interior. Shin decides he'll have to explore it himself. SHNI wonders if Shin will leave once he finds a way back to his world, to which Shin affirms. SHNI admits she knew he would say that. Shin then asks how much she remembers from when their world was just a game. She recalls everything from the time they descended into this land until the end. She mentions becoming more self-aware around the time they turned it a death game, noting that before then, it felt like she was watching a video, or observing from above. Shin reflects on Shni's awareness of their imminent disappearance upon the players logging out, and ponders what they all must have experienced at that time. Shni reassures Shin that they wouldn't have troubled him with such information, and emphasizes that they were not entirely autonomous back then. Even if they wanted to, they couldn't have taken any action. Learning about their self-awareness now, Shin admits to second-guessing everything. Shni acknowledges that Shin would have fought regardless, reminding him of their promise. To uplift the mood, Shni suggests putting an end to the sad talk and having a celebration once they return to the Moon Sanctum. Before that, she asks about the identity of a little fox accompanying Shin. Shin introduces Yuzua as his partner, explaining that she is an elemental tail. Shni discerns Yuzua's uniqueness upon seeing her tails and confirms her suspicion when she notices Yuzua now has 3 tails. Yuzua greets Shin good morning, surprising him with her ability to speak. Yuzua attributes her newfound ability to her head clearing up when the black substance disappeared. Shin realizes that the shrine was also surrounded by skull faces, and deduces that the lord he defeated earlier must have been their leader. Concerned about maintaining secrecy, Shin advises Yuzua not to speak in front of others. Yuzua wonders if she can communicate with him telepathically. Shin agrees to Yuzua merging her 3 tails into one to maintain discretion around others, and Yuzua complies. Impressed by Yuzua's cuteness, Shni expresses her desire to pet her. As she pets Yuzua, Shni acknowledges Shin's knack for surprising her, noting that no one in the game has ever tamed an elemental tail, except for him. She recognizes Shin's unique capabilities, stating that unlike the previous element tail they encountered, Yuzua has a lower level. Shin explains the difficulty of weakening an elemental tail, emphasizing the need to remain vigilant around such monsters. He decides it's time to leave, having sent his companions ahead. Shni suggests they hurry to catch up with them, and Shin agrees, expressing a desire to prevent their companions from reporting their encounter to the guild. Schnee remarks that they could have postponed their conversation if Shin had informed her sooner, but Shin confesses that he couldn't wait to speak with her after seeing her face. They depart, leaving Licia and Wilhelm elsewhere. Licia expresses concern for Shin's safety, but Wilhelm reassures her, citing Shin's strength. Suddenly, they notice something rapidly approaching them. Initially fearing it's a monster, they realize it's just Shin and Schnee. Wilhelm asks Shin not to surprise them like that again. In another location, Ryan investigates the aftermath of Shin's battle with the Skullface Lord. Her soldiers report that they couldn't find any traces of the incident. They explain that after hearing a mysterious voice, the horde of Skullfaces vanished, and a light emitted from the area healed their soldiers. Puzzled by the events, Ryan wonders who might be responsible. One of the soldiers presents her with a sword found at the bottom of a fissure. He explains that the sword was engraved at the end of the fissure, and suggests it might have caused the crevice. Uncertain of the skill behind it, he points out a falcon emblem on the hilt, indicating it was made by a renowned blacksmith known as the Black Blacksmith. Despite its worn appearance, the soldier notes the sword's formidable power. Ryan is taken aback by this revelation. Rian is surprised to hear this. She mentions that the high humans are supposed to be extinct, and the soldier states that this is why he can't back up his theory. But it's clear that there is an extraordinary human around here who can treat weapons of this level as disposable. Rian then thinks that the Ebon blacksmith is supposed to be the owner of the Moon Sanctum, and she mentions that they should ask around after they get back to the kingdom. The soldier wonders what she is going to do if a high human has really returned, and Ryan states that she would like to have a duel with him. She mentions that she wouldn't mind marrying him either, and the soldier warns her to not think about slashing this person out of the blue. Ryan states that she is not that unreasonable, and the scene cuts to Wilhelm asking Shin to explain himself. Shin wonders why he is being so confrontational, and Wilhelm mentions that Shin did come here with Schnee Razor, who never bows down to anyone. He wonders what happened, and Shin tells him that Schnee defeated the Skull-Face Lord. Wilhelm then points his spear at Shin, and he mentions that he did notice Shin exert some unbelievable magic, and he asks him to stop acting like he did nothing. He states that Shin must have wreaked havoc back there, and Shin wonders how Wilhelm knows this. Wilhelm then becomes angry and starts attacking Shin relentlessly, but Shin successfully avoids all of his strikes. Wilhelm demands that Shin stop fooling around and explain everything, so Shin reveals that he is a high human and Schnee's master. Wilhelm believes that Shin's immense magical power is now understandable, and Shin clarifies that he had restrained his power during their previous encounter. He then inquires if there are any remaining records about high humans, to which Wilhelm confirms that they know high humans were incredibly powerful and possessed exceptional skills. Some people have their own legendary tales about them, and Shin worries that revealing his identity could cause trouble. Shin then reveals his occupation as a blacksmith, and offers to reforge Wilhelm's spear, allowing him to customize it however he likes. However, Wilhelm declines the offer. Licia wakes up and is surprised to see Shin there. She expresses relief that he is safe, and Shin informs her that he managed to escape the situation somehow. Licia then notices Schnee, and Schnee introduces herself to her. Licia is surprised to learn about her identity, and the group continues their journey back to the kingdom. Shin informs Wilhelm that they will part ways upon reaching the gate, and Wilhelm is fine with this, as their only request was for him to obtain the necessary skill. He clarifies that anything happening in the church is no longer his concern. Eventually, they arrive at the kingdom's gates. Shin offers a message card to Wilhelm for emergency contact, but Wilhelm declines, stating it won't be necessary. He explains that involving Shin further would complicate matters, and Shin understands, but still insists Wilhelm take the letter. Shin expresses his inability to rest, knowing he hasn't done all he can, and he mentions his commitment to his first friend and the children he's protecting. He urges Wilhelm to accept the letter without further embarrassment, and Wilhelm departs after taking it. Shiny then remarks to Shin that he hasn't changed, noting that he's always been this way. He never boasted about his strength and always protected the weak. The two of them arrive at the Moon Sanctum, and Shin expresses his hunger. Shiny suggests they have dinner together, and Tiara joins them. She excitedly informs Shiny that someone wants to meet her, but notices she's already with Shin. Shin explains that something has happened and suggests they eat first. Tiara is surprised that Shin will be dining with them and wonders why. Schnee reveals that Shin is actually the owner of the Moon Sanctum. Tiara finds it hard to believe and remarks that Shin must be the legendary high human. Shin reminds her that he mentioned this before, and Tiara thought he was joking. She apologizes for being so familiar with him, but Shin assures her not to worry. Tiara wonders if he's not going to kick her out, and Shin confirms he won't. Shin then tells her about Yuzua being an elemental tail who can speak, which surprises her even more. Later, the three of them have dinner, and Tara remarks that she's never seen these dishes before, noting that Shiny seems to be going all out. She notices an aura emanating from their food and wonders what kind of ingredients Shiny has used. Shin explains that the fruits are Idea fruits and topaz pears, the vegetables are blood radish and kalama onions, and the meat is from thermal lion and orc king. Shni explains that she chose the best ingredients available for the occasion, although she didn't have time to prepare anything elaborate. Shin realizes she could have made something even better. Tiara remarks that the ingredients they mentioned are high-end and almost impossible to acquire. Shin questions if this is true and asks Shni about the aura Tiara mentioned. Shni clarifies that it's the residual mana, or life force in the ingredients, often visible when preparing food with powerful monsters or rare plants. They all enjoy their meal. Shin learns that the support characters have moved on to live their own lives. Shiny explains that they understood it was best not to worry about Shin. Shin agrees, not wanting them to search for someone who might not be around. Shiny adds that even if they did, it would be their choice. Tiara tells Shin he worries too much, appearing a bit intoxicated. She mentions seeing two of her masters, and Shin asks Shni if she's lightweight. Shni admits she's never seen Tiara like this and puts her to bed. The scene shifts to Shin in his room, where he notices Yuzuha is already asleep. He also goes to sleep, but wakes up at night feeling something heavy on top of him. Realizing it's not Yuzuha, he discovers Shni sleeping next to him. Concerned, he notices she's crying and calling for him. Shin wipes her tears, though he doesn't understand their significance, and apologizes to her. In the morning, Shin wakes up to find Yuzuha has transformed into a girl. Embarrassed by her nudity, he hastily tells her to cover up. He offers her clothing typically worn by element tails in the game, assuring her it will adjust to her size. Yuzuha puts it on, and they head outside. Shni is surprised to see Yuzuha's transformation, and the four of them share breakfast. Later, they converse, and Shin questions Yuzuha about why she was at the shrine. She explains she found it the least uncomfortable place to be inside. Shin then asks if she recognizes the symbol drawn inside the shrine. Yuzuha responds that she doesn't recognize the symbol. Shin considers that it might have been something meant to alleviate symptoms and provide comfort. He then inquires if Yuzuha knows anything about a significant number of people disappearing 500 years ago. Yuzuha explains that she doesn't, as visitors are rare. When asked what she was doing at the shrine, Yuzuha recalls initially napping in the sun until the ground began cracking and the winds picked up suddenly. This woke her, prompting her to prevent further ground damage. Shin concludes that it was likely a natural disaster, and Yuzuha's efforts were to mitigate its effects. He speculates that as element tails can control all elements, she likely intervened uniquely in the situation. Yuzuha shares that her exertions left her injured, leading her to seek refuge in the shrine, where Shin eventually rescued her. Shin credits their timely arrival to Millie's guidance. Yuzuha expresses her intention to thank Millie again, prompting Shin to propose bringing her a gift. Shiny suggests keffel, an elven baked treat made by Tiara, which has become a top product at their store. Tiara admits to selling some on a whim, despite the Moon Sanctum not being intended for food sales. Shni reminds Shin that they can't replenish supplies without him, as he's the only one who can access the armory. Shin announces his intention to craft a few swords later to restock their inventory, prompting Shni to suggest discussing something important. Curious, Shin inquires about the topic, and Shni reveals her desire for Shin to meet Gerard. Shin expresses surprise at Gerard still being alive, considering it's been 500 years since the dusk of prosperity, and high beasts like Gerard typically have a lifespan of 150 years at most. Shni emphasizes the urgency, noting that Gerard likely doesn't have much time left and is eagerly awaiting Shin's arrival. She reminds Shin of Gerard's past accomplishment of uniting the various beast tribes to form the Farn Beast Alliance. Shin recalls Gerard being known as the first Beast King, and Shiny adds that the current king, the eighth one, possesses all the military might and leadership ability, allowing Gerard to await Shin's arrival peacefully. Acknowledging the importance of meeting Gerard, Shin decides they'll travel normally since Gerard isn't in immediate danger. He inquires if they can leave the following day, to which they confirm. Tiara offers to watch the shop as usual, but Shiny insists on joining them, stating that with Shin's return, they no longer need to be particular about staying in one location. Tiara expresses confusion about Shin's statement, prompting Shin to explain that they will be taking the shop with them. However, Tiara still doesn't grasp the concept. Shin reassures her not to worry and suggests it would be beneficial for her to travel with them since she can finally leave her current location. Tiara agrees, and Shin suggests they start preparing, emphasizing the need for supplies. SHNI adds that she will report about the Skull Face Lord to the capital first. Shin plans to visit the guild after crafting some swords and look for a job in the direction of Farnet to rank up. SHNI wonders where they should meet afterward, and Shin plans to inform her via a message card. SHNI proposes forming a party so they can use telepathy. Shin creates the party, and Shiny advises Tiara to register as an adventurer. Shin invites her to accompany him, and she agrees to change into suitable attire before leaving. Shin decides to wait for her while he forges swords, and they split up. The scene shifts to Shin at the forge, where he instructs Yuzuha not to touch anything due to cursed swords present. He begins crafting a sword, realizing he instinctively knows where to strike the steel, likely due to his skills. After crafting his first sword, he realizes it's too powerful and imbued with magic, making it unsellable in the kingdom. Shin attempts to craft more swords while restraining his power, and eventually produces several. Tiara arrives, and they head outside. Shin inadvertently stares at her chest, which Tiara notices. In jest, she makes Shin pay for everything as punishment, and they proceed to the guild. This brings an end to our episode.